I set my coffee mug on the kitchen counter and went quiet. I just listened. My son Ethan stood by the window. His wife Allison stood right beside him. They were talking about square footage and market prices like I was a lamp in the corner instead of a person. Later that night, after they finally drove off, I opened Susan's folder from the safe. Then I called the attorney in Wyoming about turning on what Susan always called our escape plan. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind, so you understand how I ended up here. And more importantly, who everybody is in this mess, because it matters. My name is Gary Mitchell. I am 67 years old. I am retired. I spent 42 years as a civil engineer, designing water treatment systems all over the Midwest. My wife, Susan, died 6 weeks ago from heart disease. She was 65. We were married 43 years. We have 2 kids. My son Ethan is 41. He works as an investment banker in downtown Chicago. He is married to Allison. My daughter is Kimberly, 38, a marketing executive. She is married to Tyler, and Tyler sells commercial real estate. Then there is my nephew, Caleb. Caleb is 26. He is a wildlife photographer. His mom was my younger sister, Karen. Karen died in a car wreck when Caleb was 7 years old. Susan and I raised him right alongside our own children. To me, he is as much my son as Ethan is. That is the family tree. Hold on to it, because it gets messy. The day of Susan's funeral was bitter cold. It was February in Chicago, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and refuses to leave. St. Michael's Church was packed. Susan had worked as a nurse for 38 years before she retired. People loved her. The community showed up for her. I sat in the front pew with Ethan on one side and Kimberly on the other. Caleb sat close too. During the eulogy, he kept a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm, like he was trying to hold me up. What sticks with me most is not the service. It is what happened afterward. Back at the house, people filled the rooms for the reception. I went into the kitchen to make coffee for guests. While the pot was heating up, I heard voices in the hallway. Ethan and Allison. They did not know I was in the kitchen. Allison was talking like she was already holding a set of keys. She said the house had to be worth at least $850,000, maybe $900,000. Then she started listing money like she was reading off a menu. Retirement accounts. Savings. Susan's pension. Ethan answered her and said Susan's pension would stop now that she was gone. He said my pension was solid. He also mentioned whatever life insurance Susan had. I stood there with the coffee pot in my hand, and I felt myself go cold all over again. Allison kept going. She said we needed to talk to me about downsizing. She said the house was too big for me alone, and I should sell and move into a condominium. She said the market was hot. Ethan told her to give it a week, then they would bring it up. They did not give it a week. 3 days later, Ethan came to my house with a folder stuffed with real estate listings. He sat down and started spreading brochures across my dining room table. Senior apartments, assisted living places, condominiums, retirement communities, like he was shopping for a couch. He looked at me and said we needed to talk about my living situation. I told him the truth. I said I was 67, not 90, and I was not going anywhere. Allison had come with him. She jumped in like she owned half the sentence. She said I needed to be realistic. She started listing off the house like it was a problem. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a half-acre yard. She said the maintenance and the property taxes were too much for one person. I told them I had been taking care of that house for 40 years. I said I thought I could keep managing. Ethan used that smooth banker voice of his, the one he probably uses when a client will not listen. He said it was not only about managing. He said it was about being smart with my assets. He said if I sold right now, I could clear about $700,000 after the mortgage. He said if that money was invested the right way and mixed with my pension and my Social Security, I could live very comfortably in a nice 2-bedroom condominium. I asked him a simple question. I asked what happens to the equity I would be giving up. Ethan and Allison looked at each other. Just a quick glance, but I saw it. Then Ethan answered carefully. He said that eventually the equity would be part of the estate. He said Kimberly, and he would inherit it. So, he said, it was really just a matter of timing. That was the moment the mask slipped. It was never about the house being too big for me. They wanted the house turned into cash now, so they could get to the money sooner. I told them I was not selling. The next day, Kimberly came by with Tyler. Same subject. New tone. Kimberly called me daddy and said they were worried about me. She said I had been through trauma. She said I was not thinking clearly. She pointed at the house and said it was filled with memories of Susan. She asked if it would not be easier to start fresh somewhere else. I told her every memory of her mother in that house was precious to me. I asked why I would want to leave it. Tyler spoke up like he was the expert in the room. He said holding on to the past was not healthy. He leaned back in his chair with his hands behind his head, like he had paid the mortgage himself. He told me his therapist said that after a loss, people need to make big changes to process grief properly. I repeated the word therapist because I could not believe what I was hearing. Tyler said his therapist was a certified professional. Then he added that the man charged $300 an hour, so you know he was good. Over the next 2 weeks, things did not calm down. They got worse. Ethan hired an appraiser without asking me. One day a man showed up at my door with a clipboard and said Ethan had sent him to evaluate the property. I told him to leave. Kimberly called a moving company and got an estimate for packing up the house. Allison started stopping by during the daytime while I was out. Later I learned she had been measuring rooms and taking pictures. One time I caught her in Susan's sewing room. She was photographing the built-in cabinets Susan had loved. I stood in the doorway and asked her what she was doing. She startled like a kid caught sneaking cookies. She told me she was thinking about staging ideas. She said it would help when I listed the house. I told her I was not listing the house. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said, "Not yet." Then she said that when I did, they wanted to make sure I got top dollar. The breaking point came 3 weeks after Susan's funeral. I came home from the grocery store and walked into my living room, and there they all were. Ethan, Kimberly, Allison, Tyler, all sitting together like a little council. Ethan had used his old house key to let them in. He announced that they needed to have a family meeting. I set my grocery bags down and asked if we were doing this in my house, without my permission. Kimberly said something that made my stomach turn. She said that technically it was their house too. Eventually, Ethan told me to sit down. Then he said they had made some decisions. I asked him what decisions. Allison pulled out a folder, neat and organized, like she had been waiting for this moment. She said they had consulted with an estate attorney. She said that because of my age and Susan's passing, it made sense to start transitioning assets now. She talked about avoiding probate. She talked about minimizing estate taxes. She called it all very standard. Kimberly jumped in fast, like she wanted to soften the blow. She said they had found me a beautiful condominium in Oak Park. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, all 1 floor. She mentioned a community center. She mentioned a shuttle that goes to the grocery store. Then Ethan said they had already scheduled the listing for next month. He said April 1st. He said spring market is the best time to sell. He said they were using a colleague of Allison's, a top producer in the area. He said that agent expected offers within 2 weeks. I stared at them. My children, my son-in-law, my daughter-in-law, sitting in the home Susan and I built together, talking like I was already gone. I told them to get out. I said it quietly at first. Ethan told me to be reasonable. I told them again, get out of my house. They said they were trying to help me. I told them the truth. I said they were trying to help themselves to my money and to Susan's memory. I told them to leave before I called the police and had them removed for trespassing. They left. But Ethan turned back at the door and said they would be back when I was thinking more clearly. After they were gone, I stood in the empty living room for a long time, and I just listened to the silence. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom and walked straight to the closet where Susan kept the important papers. Susan was always more organized than I ever was. Everything had a place. Everything was labeled. Everything was filed like she expected somebody might need it someday. Up on the top shelf sat a fireproof box. I reached for it, opened it, and found exactly what I was looking for. A manila folder. On the front, in Susan's handwriting, it said, "For Gary. Open after I am gone." My hands shook a little when I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Susan's neat script, dated 6 months before she died. It started like this. "My dearest Gary, if you are reading this, I am gone, and I imagine our children are circling like vultures." I sat down right there and read that letter 3 times. Then I went through everything else she had tucked inside. Property deeds, bank statements, trust papers, a timeline with steps to follow, names and phone numbers for attorneys, accountants, and real estate people in Wyoming, and photographs of a place I had not laid eyes on in 45 years. Susan had planned it all. The next morning, I called the first number on her list, a lawyer named Hannah Park in Jackson, Wyoming. When I told her who I was, she did not sound surprised at all. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, I have been expecting your call. She told me Susan had set up the trust 2 years ago. She said, everything is ready whenever you are. I told her, walk me through it. Here is what Susan had done. 3 years ago, when her heart condition was first diagnosed, she started planning. She knew, whether I wanted to admit it or not, that her time might be limited. And she knew our kids well enough to predict exactly how they would act after she died. So she made her moves quietly, carefully, without making noise. That house we stayed in for our honeymoon in Wyoming, 45 years back, had belonged to Susan's uncle. When he died 15 years ago, he left it to Susan in his will. It was a 480-acre ranch in the Teton Valley, about 40 minutes from Jackson. I had known about it in a vague way, but I never paid much attention. I thought it was just a sentimental keepsake, a memory with a deed attached. 2 years ago, Susan quietly stopped renting it out. For years, she had rented it to a local family for very little money, and they kept up the place in exchange. But that ended. Then she hired contractors and had the main house renovated from top to bottom. A new roof, new plumbing, new electrical, a modern kitchen, updated bathrooms. She also had the barn converted into a photography studio and a darkroom. And the old bunkhouse became a guest cottage. Susan did not stop there. She created a trust funded with money from stock she had inherited from her parents. That trust was set up to cover property taxes and upkeep for the next 20 years. Then she set up a second trust. Over those 2 years, she moved money into it little by little from our joint savings account. Small amounts. Nothing that would make my eyes stop when I skimmed the statements. By the time she died, she had moved $400,000 into that trust. And she left just enough in our normal accounts to keep everything looking ordinary. Then came the part that really made my stomach flip. Our Chicago house had a second mortgage, one I did not even know existed. Susan took it out quietly 2 years ago for $150,000. She used that money, plus the money from selling her parents' old house, to pay for the Wyoming renovation work and to build up those trusts. The payments for that second mortgage were set to withdraw automatically from an account I never looked at. So here's what it meant. The Chicago house that Ethan and Kimberly were drooling over had almost no real equity. Between the original mortgage and the second mortgage, there might have been $50,000 of actual value left. Everything else, Susan had already moved to Wyoming, piece by piece, like a person moving chess pieces while everybody else was playing checkers. On the phone, Hannah Park said, "Mrs. Mitchell left you a way out." And she left instructions. Then she told me exactly what Susan wanted me to do. I was supposed to transfer ownership of the Chicago house to Ethan and Kimberly immediately. Give it to them. Hand it right over. Just give it to them. I said. Yes, Hannah said. Along with the mortgages. Both of them. They will be responsible for the debt. Then she said something that made me shake my head in disbelief. She said Susan's letter suggested I tell them it was their inheritance early. Susan believed they would be so thrilled to get the house that they would not read the fine print until it was too late. I started laughing right there on the phone. I could not help it. Susan, even after she was gone, still knew exactly what she was doing. Then I asked, what about the retirement accounts? Hannah said Susan had left those alone. They were still in my name. She also said Susan suggested I might want to name my nephew Caleb as the primary beneficiary instead of Ethan and Kimberly. But she said that part was my choice. And the ranch in Wyoming? It was fully paid off, completely renovated, ready to live in. The trust covered everything, taxes, maintenance, all of it. Hannah told me I could move in the next day if I wanted to. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I said, set it up. The next 2 weeks took careful planning. I could not let Ethan and Kimberly suspect anything. I had to look like a grieving widower who was slowly coming around to their way of thinking. Ethan called every few days to check in. I played my part. I let my resistance soften bit by bit. I said, yes, maybe the house was too big. Yes, maybe a change would do me good. I let him believe he was wearing me down. Meanwhile, I was packing. At first, I packed only essentials. Clothes, personal items, Susan's jewelry, photo albums. Caleb helped me because he was the only one I told. He came over pretending to help me clean out the garage. When I explained what was happening, he stared at me like he could not believe his own ears. They are really doing this, he said. They really are, I told him. And Susan knew they would. I showed him the letter. He read it slowly, and his jaw got tighter with every paragraph. When he finished, he looked up at me and said, quiet as a confession, She was a genius. She knew our family better than I wanted to admit, I said. Then he asked, what about me? Am I supposed to go to Wyoming with you? I told him, your Aunt Susan left specific instructions about you. I explained there was a studio in the converted barn. She had it designed for photography, darkroom, natural light, everything. She wanted him to have it. Caleb's eyes watered up. She did that for me, he said. She loved you like you were her own son, I told him. You were the one who visited her in the hospital every single day. You were the one who called just to talk. Susan noticed him. Susan noticed everything. For the next week, we packed carefully. We rented a storage unit across town and started moving things there little by little. Susan's china, the furniture that had belonged to my parents, books, artwork, anything that mattered to me. We left the big obvious stuff behind. We left what Ethan and Kimberly expected to find. We left the kind of things they would glance at and think, yep, it is all still here. Then came the close call. It was a Tuesday. I had just loaded a box of Susan's nursing textbooks into my car when Allison pulled into the driveway. Gary, she called out. Perfect timing. I wanted to talk to you about the kitchen remodel. The kitchen remodel? I repeated, shutting the trunk. For after you move out, she said, cheerful as a morning show host. Ethan and I are thinking of keeping the house instead of selling. Use it as an investment property or maybe a vacation rental. But the kitchen is so dated. Then she started describing it like she was already picking paint. She said white subway tile. She said maybe a waterfall island. I stared at her and said, slow and clear, you are planning to remodel my kitchen. Well, she said, it will be our kitchen soon. Then she added, like she was stating the weather, Ethan says you have agreed to sign the house over to him and Kimberly next month. I had not agreed to a thing, but I just gave her a small smile anyway. We are still talking about it, I said. Allison pointed at my open trunk. What is in the box? Old books, I told her. I figured I would donate them to the library. Decluttering, like you suggested. She swallowed it whole. Oh, that is wonderful, Gary, she said. It is so healthy that you are letting go. If she had bothered to look closely, she would have noticed my car was packed full. But she did not look. Truth is, she never really looked at me at all. The final meeting happened 4 weeks to the day after Susan's funeral. I set it up myself. I called Ethan and Kimberly and asked them to come over. I told them I had made a decision about the house. They showed up within 5 minutes of each other, like they had planned it. Allison came with Ethan. Tyler came with Kimberly. Of course they did. Caleb was already there too, sitting quietly in the corner. They barely acknowledged him. I sat down in my leather armchair, the one Susan had given me for my 60th birthday. I let the moment stretch just long enough to make them uneasy. Then I said, I have been thinking about what you told me. About the house being too big. About starting fresh. I looked them in the eye. You were right, I said. It is time for a change. Ethan and Kimberly traded those little victory looks people give each other when they think they just won. Then I said, I am going to sign the house over to the two of you. I let that land. 50-50, I added. You will take ownership immediately. Kimberly lit up. That is wonderful, Dad. This is really the best decision. I think so too, I said. Then I pulled out the folder Hannah Park had prepared. The deed transfer paperwork is right here, I told them. You will need to sign too, accepting the transfer and all associated responsibilities. Ethan blinked. Associated responsibilities? The property taxes, I said. Homeowner's insurance. The mortgages. All of it transfers with the deed. Standard procedure. At the word mortgages, Allison's smile twitched. Mortgages, she said. Plural? Yes, I said. There is the original mortgage. About $200,000 left on it. I paused, nice and steady. And there is the second mortgage. $150,000. Tyler's mouth fell open. Allison's face went stiff. I watched them read. I watched Ethan's expression change from confused to pale. I watched Kimberly's hand start to shake as she flipped pages. This house has $350,000 in debt, Ethan said. He looked up at me like I had slapped him. You said it was almost paid off. I never said that. I replied, calm as a flat lake. You assumed it. You never once asked to see mortgage statements. Allison snapped. Who takes out a second mortgage at your age? Your mother did, I said. 2 years ago. She had her reasons. Kimberly threw the papers down. This is insane. With property taxes and insurance, this place costs $4,500 a month just to maintain. Then sell it. I said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. That was your plan anyway. Sell it. Tyler gave a hard, bitter laugh. After transfer fees and real estate commissions, they would be lucky to clear $100,000. Split 2 ways, that is about $50,000 each. For a house you all kept saying was worth nearly $1 million. I shrugged. Market changes. You cannot predict everything. Ethan's eyes narrowed. I could see that banker brain of his finally waking up. There is something else going on, he said. Where's the rest of the money? Mom's savings. The retirement accounts. The life insurance. The life insurance was a $50,000 policy, I said. It barely covered the funeral. I held up a finger for the next part. The retirement accounts are mine. They are in my name only. They are staying that way. Kimberly leaned forward. And Mom's savings? She spent it, I said simply. Over the last 2 years. Medical bills. Some charitable donations. Personal expenses. It is documented, if you want to see bank statements. That was not technically a lie. Susan had spent the savings. Just not on what they thought. Ethan stared at me a long moment, then said, You are not keeping the house either. His voice dropped. Are you? You are going somewhere. I almost smiled. Too late, but he was catching on. I am retiring, I said. I am leaving Chicago. I already closed the accounts at First National and moved everything to a bank in Wyoming. I am moving next week. Wyoming, Kimberly said. Why Wyoming? Your mother and I honeymooned there, I told her. It seemed like the right place to start over. Allison's voice turned sharp and high. So you are leaving us with a debt-loaded house and disappearing. I looked right at her. I am giving you exactly what you asked for, I said. The house. Early inheritance. Just like you wanted. Then I added, the fact that it is not worth what you hoped is not my problem. Ethan's face hardened. This is fraud. We will sue. Mom could not have hidden $300,000 without my knowing. I cut him off. She could, and she did. I kept my tone even. Her money, her decisions, everything legal, everything documented. Hannah Parkin Jackson can send you copies of all of it if you want. She is very thorough. I stood up. Now, if you will excuse me, I have packing to finish. The movers come Monday. I pointed toward the folder. You can pick up the keys from Hannah's office. She is handling the deed transfer remotely. Kimberly's eyes were wet, but the look behind them was not sadness. It was rage. You cannot do this, she said. I already did, I said. Then I looked over at Caleb. Caleb, I said. You ready? He stood up. He had been quiet the whole time, just watching them dig their own hole. Now he reached down and picked up 2 duffel bags we had staged by the door. Ethan frowned. You are taking him? Then he sneered. Of course you are. Your little charity case. I felt something hard settle in my chest. Caleb is more family to me than you have been in years, I said. He is coming with me. Tyler scoffed. The ranch has plenty of space, I added, and I watched that word hit them. Kimberly blinked. Ranch? What ranch? She asked. But I was done explaining. Caleb and I walked out the front door of that house for the last time. Behind us, the shouting started. Allison and Tyler yelling at Ethan and Kimberly. Ethan and Kimberly yelling back. Everybody yelling at everybody. But the noise faded as soon as I shut my car door. As we pulled away, Caleb looked over at me. How do you feel? He asked. I kept my eyes on the road. Free, I said. That Monday, the movers came like I told everyone they would. But they did not go to the Chicago house. They went to the storage unit across town, the one Caleb and I had been using to hide everything that mattered. They loaded up Susan's china, the family furniture, the books, the photos, the pieces of our life that were worth more than money. Then the truck headed west to Wyoming. Ethan and Kimberly tried to fight the deed transfer, just like I expected. Hannah called me 2 days after I got to Wyoming. She told me they had hired an attorney. It went nowhere. Susan had kept records like a professional. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every decision. Paperwork that showed it was her money and her choice. The lawyer Ethan hired took one look at those trust documents and told them to drop it. They held on to the Chicago house for 3 months, trying to find a buyer who would pay enough to make it feel like a win. Eventually, they sold it at a loss. When it was all said and done, they split what was left, $53,000. Kimberly sent me one text message. Hope you are happy. I did not text back. Because I was. The ranch in Wyoming was everything Susan's photographs promised. For 180 acres in the Teton Valley, with the mountains rising to the east like old stone guardians. The main house was a big log home with huge windows facing sunrise. Susan had overseen every detail of the renovations. The kitchen had granite counters and professional-grade appliances, because she knew I liked to cook. The main bedroom had a reading nook, because she knew I would need quiet. The study had built-in bookshelves, already filled with books she had been shipping out over the past year. Books I had casually mentioned wanting to read. It felt like she built a whole new life for me, then left it sitting there, waiting for me to walk in. Caleb moved into the converted barn. The photography studio had everything he needed. Professional lighting, backdrop systems, a proper darkroom, temperature-controlled chemical storage. It was the kind of setup a working pro would dream about. And Susan had made sure it was his. Within a month, Caleb had his own freelance business up and running. He was out photographing wildlife and selling prints online. I had never seen him that happy, not even as a kid. As for me, I spent my days learning the land like it was a new language. There was a creek that ran right through the property, cold and clear from mountain snowmelt. There was a grove of aspens that turned bright gold in September. Most evenings, elk came down from the high country like they owned the place, moving slow and steady through the grass. I bought a horse too, a gentle old gelding named Copper. I rode the fence lines and learned every corner of my new home, post by post, gate by gate. At night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee and looked up. Out there, away from city lights, the sky was packed with stars. Not a few, not a handful, a whole ocean of them. Susan and I had sat under those same stars 45 years earlier, young and newly married, talking about the life we thought we were going to build together. 3 months after we moved in, I found Susan's last letter. It was tucked inside a copy of her favorite book, The Yearling, sitting on the shelf in the study. The letter started simple. "Gary," it said, "if you are reading this, you made it. You are free." Then it hit me harder. "I am so proud of you. I know you are probably feeling guilty, like you abandoned our children. Do not. They abandoned us first, years ago." She put it plain. "When was the last time Ethan called just to talk? When did Kimberly last visit without wanting something?" Then she wrote the part that made my throat tighten. "Caleb is your son now. He is the one who chose to stay when everyone else left. Love him like he deserves." Then she started naming the life she wanted for us, like she was standing right beside me. "Watch the sunrise from that porch. Ride through the aspens in September. Feed the elk that come down in the evenings. And know that every single choice I made was so you could have this." She ended it the way she always did, straight from the heart. "I love you. I will always love you. And do not you dare waste this gift being sad. Susan." I read it sitting in the leather chair she had shipped to Wyoming, the same one from our Chicago living room. And I cried, not from sadness, from gratitude. For 43 years with a woman who knew me better than I knew myself. A woman who planned for my future even when she knew she would not be here to share it. About an hour later, Caleb found me there. "You okay?" he asked. I handed him the letter. He read it slow, and by the end, he was wiping his own eyes. "She really loved you," he said. "She loved both of us," I told him. "That is why we are here." A year later, Ethan called. Out of the blue, on a Tuesday morning. I was fixing fence posts in the south pasture when my phone rang. "Dad," he said. His voice sounded different. Smaller. "How are you?" "I am doing well," I said. "How about you?" "Fine. Good. Busy with work." There was a pause that felt heavy. Then he said it. "Allison and I are getting divorced." "I am sorry to hear that," I told him, and I meant it. No matter what had happened, I did not wish misery on anybody. Ethan let out a bitter breath. "She was only with me for the money," he said. "After the house thing fell apart, after it was clear I was not getting a big inheritance, she changed. Started fights over everything. Then she just left." I did not say what I was thinking. That Susan probably saw that coming too. Ethan kept going. "Kimberly and Tyler are having problems too," he said. "Turns out when you marry for money and the money does not show up, there is not much left." I leaned on a fence post and listened. Then I asked him, as gently as I could, "Why are you calling, Ethan?" I heard him swallow. "I wanted to say I am sorry," he said, "for how we treated you, for how we treated Mom's memory." "You were right," he added. "We were vultures." I sat down on a fence rail and looked out at the mountains. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. He hesitated, like he had one more thing to ask, but did not know if he deserved to. Is there any chance, he started. Then he tried again. Could I come visit? See where you are living? I would like to talk. Really talk. Not about money. Not about inheritance. Just talk. I thought about it. I thought about Susan's letter. I thought about the years of neglect. I thought about how they swarmed me after her funeral like predators. But I also thought about this moment. Him calling, him apologizing, him sounding like a man who finally understood what he had done. People can change sometimes, if you give them room. Call me next week, I said. We will figure out a time. I do not know if Ethan will actually come. Maybe he will. Maybe he will not. But I left the door cracked open, because I knew that is what Susan would have done. She was always better at forgiveness than I was. Last month, Caleb and I celebrated his 27th birthday with a bonfire down by the creek. He had just sold his first major photo collection to a nature magazine. We cooked steaks over the fire and talked about his mother, my sister Karen, and how proud she would be of the man he had become. At one point he asked me, "Do you miss Chicago?" I looked around. The mountains were turning purple in the sunset. The air smelled like pine and clean water. And I thought about the life Susan had built for me, decision by decision, knowing she would never get to see it with her own eyes. I miss your aunt, I said. Every day. Then I shook my head. But Chicago? No. This is home now. And it was. The ranch. The mountains. Quiet mornings. Star-filled nights. Caleb in his studio, building a life with his own hands. Me learning how to be a rancher at 67. A life I never planned, but one that fit better than anything I left behind. Susan gave me exactly what I needed. Not only a way out from greedy children, but permission to start over. Permission to build something new. Permission to be more than just a father, or a husband, or a retired engineer. Permission to be myself, whoever that turned out to be. I still talk to her sometimes, out loud, when I am riding the fence lines or sitting on the porch in the evening. I tell her about the elk herd that has grown to 23 head. I tell her about the book I am writing, a technical memoir about water systems engineering. I tell her about Caleb's success and the life he is building. I tell her about Ethan's call and the possibility of making peace someday, though I am not holding my breath. And I tell her the same thing every day. Thank you. Thank you for knowing me well enough to save me. Thank you for planning an escape when I did not even know I needed one. Thank you for giving me the courage to walk away from people who loved my money more than they loved me. The sun is setting now as I finish my coffee. Tomorrow I am riding up to the north pasture to check the water system. It has been making a strange sound, and after 40 years as an engineer, I cannot ignore strange sounds. Caleb is coming with me. He wants to photograph the wildflowers blooming in the high meadow. It is a good life. A quiet life. Not the one I expected when I married Susan 43 years ago, but maybe a better one. Simpler. More honest. She always did know best.